My wife started giving things away. That's when I finally paid attention. My name is Walter. I am 78 years old, and for most of my life, I believed that if nothing was broken, then nothing needed fixing. That's how I thought about marriage. You stay, you show up, you do your part. You eat dinner at the same table and sleep in the same bed. And if there are long stretches where you don't have much to say to each other, well, that just means you're comfortable. That's what I told myself. My wife, Evelyn, and I have been married for 52 years. We met when we were young, when the future still felt wide open, and time didn't seem like something you could ever run out of. She was quiet even then, thoughtful, always noticing small things. I was louder, more practical, always focused on what needed to be done next. Somehow we fit. We raised 2 children in this small house near the edge of town. We painted the walls ourselves, fixed leaky sinks, watched the kids grow up at the kitchen table. Life wasn't grand, but it was steady. When the kids moved out, the house grew quieter. When I retired, the days stretched longer. And when our children built their own lives far away, it slowly became just the two of us. Now our days follow a gentle routine. I wake first and make coffee. Evelyn comes in later, wrapped in her cardigan, and sits by the window with her tea. We talk about the weather, about what groceries we need, about which bills are due. In the afternoons, I spend time in the garage fixing small things that don't really need fixing. She reads or folds laundry or tends to the few plants on the porch. In the evenings, we sit in our chairs with the television on low. Sometimes we talk, mostly we don't. I told myself this was what long love looked like. Then Evelyn started giving things away. It began so quietly that I almost didn't notice. One afternoon, I came in from the garage and saw that the old blue vase was gone from the shelf in the living room, the one her sister gave her years ago. "Where's the vase?" I asked. "Oh," she said, not looking up from her book. "I gave it to Mrs. Turner next door. She admired it once." I frowned. "You like that vase?" She smiled faintly. "I did, but she'll enjoy it too." I shrugged and let it go. A few days later, I noticed her favorite green sweater was missing from the back of her chair. "I gave it to the donation box," she said when I asked. "It might keep someone warm." "That was your good one," I said. She looked at me and said gently, "I have enough, Walter." Enough. That word stuck with me longer than I expected. Still, I didn't push. But the weeks went on, and more things disappeared. Books she'd kept for decades. Picture frames from the hallway. A set of teacups that had belonged to her mother. Each time she had an answer, a neighbor, a friend, the church bin. One evening, trying to keep it light, I said, "At this rate, you're going to give the whole house away." She smiled, but there was something tired in it. "We don't need much anymore." There it was again. Need. I laughed it off, but inside something shifted. A few days later, I found her in the bedroom, standing in front of the closet with a box at her feet. She was folding clothes carefully and placing them inside. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Sorting," she replied. "Some of these things might be useful to someone else." I leaned against the doorframe. "You've worn that blue dress for years," I said. She held it up for a moment, smiling at it. "Yes, I have." Then she folded it and put it in the box. "Are you getting rid of everything?" I asked. "No," she said softly. "Just what I don't really need anymore." I stood there, watching her for a moment longer than usual. Something about the way she moved, slow and careful, made my chest feel tight. But I still didn't ask what I was thinking. because asking would mean admitting that maybe things weren't as simple as I wanted them to be. That night, lying beside her in bed, listening to her quiet breathing, I stared at the ceiling and felt an unease I couldn't quite name. The next morning, I woke early and went into the kitchen to make coffee. On the table, I noticed a small stack of folded napkins, the kind she only used when we had guests. Beside them was a small note, written in her neat handwriting. For Mrs. Allen, she mentioned she didn't have many. I stood there for a long time, mug in my hand, staring at that note. And for the first time, a thought crossed my mind that made my heart beat faster. This isn't just cleaning. This is letting go. That was the morning I finally paid attention. That note on the kitchen table stayed with me all day. For Mrs. Allen, she mentioned she didn't have many. It wasn't just the napkins. It was the careful handwriting, the way she'd taken time to fold them neatly like it mattered how they were given. I took my coffee into the living room and sat in my chair, pretending to read the newspaper while Evelyn moved quietly around the kitchen. I watched her over the top of the pages, noticing things I hadn't paid attention to in a long time. The way she held the kettle with both hands, as if it were heavier than it used to be. The way she paused before sitting, pressing her palm lightly against the table for balance. The way her shoulders seemed a little more rounded than before. She had grown older right in front of me. And somehow I had missed it. After breakfast, she put on her coat and scarf. "I'm going to stop by Mrs. Allen S.," she said. "She's been feeling lonely since her husband passed." "I can go with you," I offered, surprising myself. She looked at me for a moment, then shook her head gently. "That's all right, Walter. It won't take long." "All right," I said. "I'll be here." She smiled, picked up the small bag with the napkins inside, and headed for the door. As it closed behind her, the house felt quieter than usual. I wandered into the bedroom and stood in front of the closet where I'd seen the box the day before. It was still there, half full. I crouched down and looked inside. Carefully folded clothes, a few scarves, one pair of shoes she rarely wore anymore. This wasn't random. This was deliberate. I straightened up when I heard the front door open and stepped away from the closet as she came back in. "Did she like the napkins?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Yes," she said, hanging up her coat. She was very thankful. "I'm glad," I replied. But I was thinking about the box. Over the next few days, I kept noticing more. A framed photo of her parents disappeared from the hallway. The small radio she kept in the kitchen was gone. Even the old quilt at the foot of our bed was missing one afternoon. Each time I asked, and each time she gave me a simple answer. I gave it to someone who needed it. It wasn't being used anymore. It's better this way. Better for who? I wanted to ask that. But instead I kept quiet, the way I always had. One afternoon, while she was in the bathroom, I noticed her purse on the table. I didn't mean to look inside, but when I moved it, a folded piece of paper slipped out. I picked it up. It was a list. Just a few lines, written in her careful script. Blue vase, Mrs. Turner. Green sweater, donation. Photo frames, kids. Teacups, church sale. Quilt, neighbor. My heart began to beat faster as I read. It wasn't just a list of things she'd already given away. There were more items below. Books, letters, kitchen tools, even jewelry. Things she still had. Things she clearly planned to give away. I folded the paper back up and slipped it where I'd found it just as I heard the bathroom door open. She came out, drying her hands on a towel, and smiled at me like nothing was wrong. I forced a smile back, but inside, something was twisting tighter. That night, as we sat in our chairs with the television on low, I tried to start a conversation. "Evelyn," I said, clearing my throat, "you've been busy lately." She glanced over at me. "Have I?" "With all this sorting," I said, "giving things away." "Oh," she replied, turning her eyes back to the screen. "I suppose so." "Is there a reason?" I asked carefully. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "It just feels like the right time." "The right time for what?" She didn't answer right away. The television murmured on between us. Finally, she said softly, "To make things simpler." That was all. I wanted to push. I wanted to say simpler for who? For me, for you, for us. But the words wouldn't come. So I nodded and let the conversation fade. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't sleep. I watched the faint glow of the streetlight through the curtains and listened to her breathing beside me, slow, even, familiar. For the first time in years, I felt afraid of losing her. Not suddenly, not in some dramatic way, but quietly, like she was already starting to step away from the life we'd built together, one small object at a time. The next morning, I made coffee and found her sitting at the table, writing in a small notebook. "What are you writing?" I asked. She closed it gently, "Just some thoughts." "Can I see?" I asked, trying to sound light. She shook her head, not unkindly. "Not right now." I nodded, but my chest tightened. Later that day, I went into the garage to distract myself, but my hands kept stopping in the middle of small tasks. My mind kept drifting back to the box in the closet, to the list, to the way she'd said the right time. By evening, I couldn't stand it anymore. I sat down across from her at the kitchen table. "Evelyn," I said more firmly this time, "you're giving away pieces of our life, and I don't understand why." She looked at me then, really looked at me. Her eyes were calm, but there was something tired in them. "I'm just trying to put things in order," she said. "In order for what?" I asked. "You make it sound like you're preparing for something." She hesitated. Then she smiled faintly and said, "We're all preparing for something, Walter. We just don't like to think about it." A chill ran through me. "What does that mean?" I asked. But she stood up and reached for my shoulder gently. "Let's not worry about it tonight," she said. "We'll talk another time." She kissed my cheek and went to bed. I stayed at the table long after she was gone, staring at the place where she'd been sitting. I realized then that I had spent years assuming everything was fine just because nothing had exploded. But something had been happening quietly, right in front of me, and I had almost missed it. After that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something important was slipping past me. Evelyn went back to her routines as if nothing had changed. She made her tea in the mornings, sat by the window with her book, folded laundry in the afternoons. But now every small movement caught my eye, every pause, every quiet moment when she seemed lost in thought. And always, things kept disappearing. One morning, I noticed the small wooden box was gone from the table beside her chair, the one where she kept old letters and cards. "Where's your box?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "Oh," she said, glancing up from her book, "I put it away." "Put it where?" "In the closet." Something about that answer unsettled me. That afternoon, while she was out in the yard talking to Mrs. Turner, I went into the bedroom. I told myself I was just looking for a sweater, but my feet carried me straight to the closet. The box was there, on the shelf above the clothes. I took it down and opened it carefully. Inside were fewer things than I remembered. A couple of birthday cards, one faded photo of our children when they were small, a short stack of folded letters tied with a ribbon. I untied it with trembling fingers. They were letters she had written. Not to anyone. To herself. The first one was dated months ago. I know he doesn't notice anymore. Not the little things. Not the way the days blend together for me. But that's all right. I don't want to burden him. He's always been good at taking care of what's right in front of him. I just wish he would see what's quietly changing. My throat tightened. I read another. Some days I feel like I'm slowly packing myself away, a drawer at a time, a memory at a time. I wonder if he'll notice when I'm finally gone. I felt a cold weight settle in my chest. Gone. I flipped through more. I'm not afraid. I've had a good life. I just don't want to leave a mess behind. I want things to be easier for him, for the kids. I hope he understands someday. My hands began to shake. I closed the box and put it back exactly where I'd found it just as I heard her footsteps in the hall. That night I barely slept. Those words echoed in my mind. When I'm finally gone. The next day I tried to act normal, but every time I looked at her, I wondered what she wasn't telling me. At breakfast, she pushed her plate away after just a few bites. "You're not hungry," I said. "I am," she replied, "just not very." I studied her face. She looked tired, more than usual. "Have you been feeling all right?" I asked. She smiled softly. "I'm fine, Walter." But I didn't believe her. That afternoon, she went to lie down for a nap, something she hadn't done much before. I sat in the living room, staring at the blank television screen, my thoughts racing. Finally, I made a decision. I would stop pretending. When she came back out, I was waiting at the kitchen table. "Evelyn," I said, "we need to talk." She sat across from me, folding her hands together. "You've been giving things away," I continued. "You've been writing lists, and I found your letters." Her eyes widened slightly. "You read them." "I did," I admitted. "And now you need to tell me what's going on." For a long moment, she just looked at me. Then she sighed and lowered her eyes. "I didn't want you to find those," she said quietly. "I'm glad I did," I replied, "because I'm scared, and I don't know why." She reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. Her hand felt warm. "I didn't mean to scare you," she said. "I just didn't know how to start." "Start what?" I asked. She took a deep breath. "I've been feeling more tired lately," she said. "And sometimes things don't feel quite right. I forget little things. I lose my balance. I get these waves of weakness." My heart pounded in my ears. "Have you seen a doctor?" I asked. She nodded. "Yes, a few weeks ago." And I pressed. She hesitated, then said softly, "They're still running tests." Tests. That word alone felt heavy. "What did they say?" I asked. "They said it could be nothing serious," she replied, "or it could be something that needs watching." "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice rising. "Because I didn't want you to worry," she said. "And because I didn't know yet, I still don't." I ran a hand over my face. "So you decided to start giving everything away." She nodded slowly. "I thought, if something does happen, I don't want you to be left with all of it. The things, the memories, the decisions. I just wanted to make it easier." Easier. The word hit me hard. "All this time," I said quietly. I thought you were drifting away from me. She looked up at me surprised. Oh, Walter, no. I was trying to take care of you. Something broke inside me then. I don't want you to take care of me like that, I said. I want to take care of you together, like we always have. Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't think you'd want to be bothered, she whispered. I stared at her. When have I ever not wanted to be bothered by you? I asked. She gave a small, sad smile. You've always been busy, in your own way. And in that moment, I realized something painful. I had been there, but I hadn't always been present. We sat there at the kitchen table for a long time after she spoke, my hand still resting in hers, the room quiet except for the ticking clock on the wall. I kept thinking about her words. You've always been busy, in your own way. I wanted to argue, to say I'd worked hard for us, that I'd been there every day, every year, that I'd never left. But as I looked at her, sitting across from me, eyes tired yet gentle, I knew she wasn't talking about where my body had been. She was talking about where my heart had gone. I never meant to make you feel alone, I said quietly. She smiled faintly. I know you didn't, that's the hardest part. I swallowed. So what did the doctor really say, Evelyn? She took a slow breath, as if choosing her words carefully. They said my heart isn't as strong as it used to be, she said, and there are signs of something else. They're not sure yet, could be treatable, could just mean I need to slow down, but they also said I should start thinking about the future, about being prepared. My chest tightened. Prepared for what? I asked, even though I already knew. For the possibility that I won't always be able to do things the way I used to, she said. For the possibility that things might change. I nodded, staring down at our hands. So you started giving things away, I said. Yes, she replied softly. It made me feel like I was doing something useful, like I still had control over something. I looked up at her, and the letters. She hesitated. Those were just my thoughts, things I didn't know how to say out loud. You wrote that you wondered if I'd notice when you were gone, I said. Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't mean gone like that, she whispered. Not exactly. I just meant if I faded into the background, if I became one more quiet thing in the house. The words hit me harder than any diagnosis could have. I reached across the table and held her face gently in my hands. Evelyn, I said, my voice shaking, I see you. I just forgot to show it. She closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. I didn't want to scare you, she said. You've always been the strong one, the one who fixes things. I thought if I told you, you'd just worry. And I didn't want to be another problem for you to solve. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. You're not a problem, I said. You're my wife. She gave a small, sad laugh. We haven't really said that in a long time, have we? No, I admitted. We haven't. We sat in silence for a few moments, letting that truth settle between us. Then I said, I don't want you preparing for the end of things by yourself. Whatever this turns out to be, we face it together. She looked at me, really looked at me, as if measuring whether I meant it. I don't want to burden you, she said again. You're not a burden, I replied, firmer this time. You're my life, you always have been. Her lips trembled, then she nodded. All right, she said softly, together. That night, we went to bed earlier than usual. But instead of turning away from each other like we often did, I reached for her hand under the covers. She squeezed it back. We lay there in the dark, hands joined, listening to each other breathe. For the first time in years, the silence between us didn't feel empty. It felt full. The next morning, I woke before her and stayed there for a while, watching her sleep. The soft lines of her face, the familiar rise and fall of her chest. I realized how long it had been since I'd really looked at her like this. When she stirred, she smiled faintly. "You're staring," she said. "I know," I replied. "I should have done it more." She reached out and touched my cheek. "We're still here, Walter." "Yes," I said, "we are." Over breakfast, we talked more than we had in months. About the doctor appointments coming up, about how tired she'd been feeling, about little fears she hadn't wanted to say out loud, and about my fears too, the ones I'd buried under routine and pretending everything was fine. "I think I hid in habits," I admitted. "It was easier than admitting I was scared of losing you." She nodded. "I think I hid in quiet. It was easier than asking you to see me." After breakfast, she stood up and glanced toward the bedroom. "There's a box in the closet," she said, "with clothes I was going to give away." I nodded. "I think," she continued slowly, "I'd like to keep some of them, for now." A small smile spread across my face. "I'd like that too," I said. That afternoon, instead of going to the garage, I sat with her by the window. She read her book. I read the newspaper, but this time our chairs were closer. Every so often, she would look up and tell me something from her book, and instead of just nodding, I asked questions. Real ones. Later, I helped her sort through the box in the closet. Some things we set aside to give away. Others we folded and put back. Each choice felt like a quiet promise. Not that nothing would change, but that we would face the changes together. That evening, as the sun set and the house filled with soft light, she leaned her head against my shoulder. "Thank you for finally paying attention," she said. I kissed the top of her head. "I'm sorry it took me so long," I replied. She smiled. "You're here now, that's what matters." And for the first time in a long while, I believed it. The days after that conversation felt different. Not louder, not dramatic, just more aware. I started waking up a little earlier, not to rush into my coffee and newspaper, but to sit at the edge of the bed for a moment and watch Evelyn sleep. I don't know why. Maybe I was afraid that if I didn't look, I'd miss something important again. When she woke, I'd say, "Good morning," the way I used to years ago, and she'd smile, still half asleep, and say it back. Small things, but they mattered. We went to her next doctor appointment together. I sat beside her in the waiting room, holding her hand while she filled out forms, noticing how she leaned into me without even thinking about it. Inside the office, I listened carefully as the doctor talked about tests, about monitoring her heart, about taking things slower. Nothing was certain yet, nothing final. But nothing was simple either. On the way home, she was quiet, looking out the window. "Are you scared?" I asked. She nodded, a little. I squeezed her hand. "Me too." And for once, I didn't feel the need to pretend I was. Back at home, we made soup together, not because we needed to, but because it gave us something to do side by side. She chopped vegetables while I stirred the pot, and every so often we'd bump into each other in the small kitchen and laugh softly. It reminded me of younger days, when the kitchen had been full of noise and little hands tugging at our sleeves. That afternoon, I skipped the garage. Instead, I sat with her by the window. She read her book. I watched the street. Every now and then she'd point something out. A neighbor walking their dog, a car she liked, a bird on the fence. And instead of just nodding, I answered, asked questions, stayed. A few days later, I noticed she hadn't picked up the notebook again. "Did you stop writing?" I asked gently. She smiled. For now, I think I'd rather talk. So we did. We talked about things we hadn't said in years. She told me she'd felt invisible sometimes, not ignored exactly, but unseen, like I was always there, but never quite with her. She said she missed when I used to ask about her books, her thoughts, her worries. I told her I'd been afraid of slowing down, afraid that if I stopped filling my days with little tasks and habits, I'd have to face how much time had passed, how close the end felt. I thought staying busy meant staying strong, I admitted, but I think it just kept me from looking at what mattered. She nodded. I think I stayed quiet because I didn't want to ask for more. I was afraid you'd feel like I was complaining. We both laughed a little at that. Two people, each trying not to bother the other, slowly drifting apart without meaning to. One afternoon, I found her standing in the bedroom, looking at the box in the closet again. This time, she wasn't putting things in. She was taking some out. She held up the blue dress she'd almost given away, the one she'd worn so many times. "I think I'll keep this one," she said, "just in case." I smiled. "I'm glad." We went through the box together, choosing what to keep and what to give. But now every choice felt shared, not like she was quietly packing herself away. That weekend, I suggested we take a short walk. "Just around the block," I said. "If you feel tired, we turn back." She hesitated, then nodded. "All right." We bundled up and stepped outside. The air was cool and crisp, the kind that wakes you up. We walked slowly, our steps matching without thinking about it. She held my arm, and I felt how light she'd become, how careful she was with each step. At the corner, she stopped. "You okay?" I asked. "Yes," she said, catching her breath. "I just wanted to look at the sky for a moment." We stood there together, watching clouds drift by. "I used to rush everywhere," I said, "always thinking about the next thing." She smiled. "You still do, just a little less now." We didn't go far that day, but when we got home, she looked proud of herself. "I'm glad we did that," she said. "Me too," I replied. That evening, we called our daughter together, not to worry her, just to talk, to tell her we missed her, to ask about her kids. Evelyn laughed when one of the grandchildren showed a drawing to the camera. I watched her face light up, and something warm settled in my chest. Later, after we hung up, Evelyn leaned her head against my shoulder. "I didn't realize how much I missed this," she said. "So did I replied. In the quiet that followed, I realized something. For years, I'd thought love was something you built once, and then just lived inside. But it was. It was something you had to keep choosing. Keep noticing. Keep paying attention to. That night, as we got into bed, she turned toward me instead of away. "Walter," she said softly, "I'm glad you finally saw me." I reached for her hand in the dark. "I'm glad you waited for me," I replied. She squeezed my fingers. "I won't wait in silence anymore," she said. "Promise me that." "I promise," I said, "and I won't hide in habits anymore either." We lay there, hands joined, the house quiet around us. But this time, the quiet felt like a place we were sharing, not a space between us. The weeks that followed settled into a new kind of rhythm. Not the old routine of quiet habits and unspoken distance, but something gentler, more aware. We still woke early, still drank our coffee and tea, still sat by the window in the mornings, but now we did it together, sometimes in silence, sometimes talking about small things, sometimes just holding hands while the day began. Evelyn had more tests, more appointments. Some days she came home tired and pale, and I'd make her soup and sit beside her until she rested. Other days she felt almost like her old self, and we'd take short walks or sit on the porch and watch people pass. Nothing was certain yet, but we had stopped pretending it didn't matter. One afternoon, as sunlight poured through the living room window, she pulled out an old photo album from the shelf. We hadn't opened it in years. "Do you remember this?" she asked, turning it toward me. It was a picture of us on our wedding day. Young, nervous, smiling like we couldn't believe this was really happening. I laughed softly. I thought my knees were going to give out that day. She smiled. "I thought you were going to forget your vows." We flipped through the pages slowly. Pictures of the kids when they were small, of camping trips, of birthdays and holidays and ordinary days that had somehow become memories. "I didn't want to give these away," she said quietly. "I just didn't want them to be forgotten." "They won't be," I said. "Not as long as I'm here." She looked at me, eyes soft. "And when you're not?" I swallowed. "We'll make sure the kids have them," I said. "But for now, they stay right here." She nodded. That evening, she took the small notebook from the drawer and handed it to me. "I don't think I need this anymore," she said. I opened it carefully. There were only a few pages left blank. "What do you want me to do with it?" I asked. "Write in it with me," she said. "New things." So we did. Every few days, we'd sit together and write a line or two, something simple. Today we walked to the corner and back. We laughed about the old blue vase. The soup tasted better when we made it together. Small moments, but they were ours. At her next appointment, the doctor told us the news was better than expected. Not perfect, but manageable. Medication, regular checkups, more rest. "It means slowing down," he said, "but it doesn't mean stopping." I felt a breath leave my chest that I didn't know I'd been holding. On the way home, Evelyn leaned her head against the car window and closed her eyes. "I guess I won't be giving everything away just yet," she said softly. I smiled. Good. I was starting to worry I'd lose my favorite coffee mug. She laughed, and the sound filled the car. That laugh stayed with me all day. That night, as we sat together in the living room, the television low, she turned to me. "You know," she said, "I didn't start giving things away because I wanted to leave." I nodded. "I know. I did it because I was afraid of being forgotten while I was still here," she continued. I took her hand. "You won't be," I said. "Not again." She squeezed my fingers. "I believe you," she said. And I meant it. Because now, every time she spoke, I listened. Every time she paused, I noticed. Every time she smiled, I looked back. One evening, as the sun set and the room filled with soft light, she said, "Walter, do you regret anything?" I thought for a moment. "I regret not paying attention sooner," I said, "but I don't regret paying attention now." She smiled. "That's enough for me." We sat there in comfortable silence, her head on my shoulder, my arm around her. And I realized something. For years I had thought love was proven by staying, by not leaving, by doing your duty. But love was also proven by turning toward someone again and again, by choosing to see them, by choosing to stay awake to their life. My wife had started giving things away. And that's when I finally paid attention. Not just to what she was losing, but to what we still had. Each other. And for the first time in a long while, that felt like more than enough.